Hi, I'm Bart Hanson. I'm the owner and lead instructor for CrushLivePoker.com. The following hand comes from our call-in show that we record live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday. If you enjoy this video, hit that like button, and if you want to submit to be on the show, take a look at the information in the description.
Yeah, I do. I played it last week or the week before at one of the local poker rooms here in Houston. I would prefer not to say which room it is, just because I have a lot of friends there and I don't want to shame anybody, I guess.
How many rooms are there in Houston, by the way?
You know, there's probably 8 or 9, but really good ones, there's probably about 3 or 4. There seems to be a lot.
3 or 4, okay. And TCH is one of those too, right?
Yep. TCH is one of them.
And the interesting thing about this is that I believe that they sell alcohol at those clubs in Houston, but they don't do that here in Austin. You can bring your own. It's kind of interesting. I guess local ordinance or something. Okay. Yep. All right. Go ahead. Set it up. What's the size of the game?
So I'm playing a 1-3 limit game. I mean, I'm sorry, a 1-3 no limit game, right. And that seems to be the only game that they have there.
So is it the match the stack?
I'm sorry?
Is it a match the stack where you can buy in basically for whatever you want?
Absolutely. You can, if I wanted to buy in for $2,000, I could. There's no max on it. So, so to start the handoff, we're playing a full table. So we're playing 1-3 limit. I had just added on. I had bought in for 700 and I lost a few hands. And then I got down to 550. And then a couple of the fish had won a few hands, and they had about 700. So I added on another 500 to bring my stack up to 1,050.
Okay.
So that's what I had effective before this hand started.
Okay. Yep.
All right. And just a side note, this room and this poker room, for some reason, everybody loves to limp. Nobody likes taking the initiative to bet. It's really weird. I've never really seen anything like it. So that's kind of something to keep in mind here.
Well, I mean, it sounds like your typical. What I've seen low stakes game. I mean, the interesting thing about these Texas games is that, you know, when people try to quantify like win rates and stuff across different levels, I mean, this is really, really extreme in Texas because, like you said, it might be the only game. Now they have a lot of 1-2 games that are capped. We'll throw those out. Those are tiny games, at least here in Austin. But if you find a 1-3 match stack game, I mean, it could play like a 10-20 game, or it could play really small. You get really, not many, but you can get some pretty good players, and then you can get some really bad players that wouldn't even be playing like a $5 blind level in LA. Like, I'm sure there are guys at 1-3 that wouldn't even be playing 500 cap. It's just a weird mix of stuff. So, all right, 1,050 effective.
All right, so I'm in the big blind, and 5 players limp all the way to me.
Okay.
I have the Jack of Diamonds, Jack of Clubs, and I make it $35, and all 5 players call immediately. I mean, there's no hesitation from any of them.
So 5 people limp in, gets back around to you, you make it 35, and they all call. Just as a curiosity, too, this is somewhat of a flowing type of, you know, get in the flow of what the table is like. What's the straight raise on, like, when you were playing, what did you notice that people were opening to without limpers at that time?
It depends. It depends on the lot. It depends a lot on the player and what they're holding. I mean, you can pretty much tell when somebody is betting pretty big that they have a pretty big hand. Generally from $15 to $25 around there.
All right. So if the first raise is $15 to $25, and then maybe if like 1 or 2 people limp, people are making it 30 or 35, I would make it a lot more than 35 here. Now people are like, see, this is where I'm talking about when you look at it on paper. It's like, oh, 12x raise with Jack. Well, the blinds almost are irrelevant here in the sense that what people are calling with and how much they are raising to, because the standard raise is 15 to 25. That will drive what people are willing to call with when you raise. So I almost look at this as like a $5 blind game where the original open is to 20. If I was in a $5 blind game and 5 people limped in, I'd be making it probably 40 with jacks. At least 40, so, and then maybe even more. It's just something to say. So they all call, and now the pot is 6 times 135, which is 210, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
All right, and the flop comes 9 of spades, 6 of hearts, 3 of spades.
So this is that's a pretty good flop for you. Nine of spades, six of hearts, three of spades, and this is where I think a lot of people who, I don't know if you'd say are new to poker or they get frustrated. Maybe they're trying to play well. They're trying to be recreational players and they're trying to improve their game. And I hear this class of player that considers themselves a sort of a student of the game, studying the game, but they get very frustrated because they're like, how can I play in this game? I get Jack. I'm not saying you caller, but Jack here, and then to make a long story short, the guy gets stacked with like 6-3. Like some guy called my $35 raise. It's an unplayable game, right? And that's obviously the wrong way to look at it because it's a very juicy game if that's the case. You just want to look at what is probable in the connectivity of the board on a ragged board when you have an overpair multiway. So this is a great example of an extreme multiway spot with an overpair where a lot of people will get scared because they're up against 5 other opponents. Now, what I mean by the connectivity is that you look for the probable 2 pair hands that are possible, and then you also look on the board if there's possible straights. So the worst possible board for an overpair would be like, for example, maybe like 7, 8, 9, where all of the 2 pair combinations are totally viable. 7, 8 suited, 7, 9 suited, 8, 7 suited, and you have a multitude of possible straights. So that 3 straight smooth ragged board, especially a little bit on the higher middle end where people will play those 2 pair cards, you've got 9, 10, you've got 5, 6. Some people might even play 10, 6. You can kind of see where I'm going with it, where those are the boards that are very, very concerning. But a board like this where there shouldn't be 2 pair represented and there's no straight out there, it's very difficult for you to be beaten right now. I mean, the board that might be better here would be like 9 deuce 3. Especially if someone's going to bring it in for 9s as an initial raiser or raising over limps. Now, someone might over limp here with 9, with a 6, but if you look at like say 10 deuce 3 rainbow, that's like one of the best types of examples where no one's going to have 10s. There's no raise pre, so really you're only losing like deuces and 3s. Yeah, you're going to get guys that might have like 9 deuce, whatever, but I'm actually not concerned here at all. Your hand needs protection, so I would probably just come out and straight bet here, and I might bet like maybe half the size of the pot, maybe 100, 125, something like that.
All right. So this is where I butchered the hand, and this is one of the main reasons why I initially emailed you, is because I think that I played this wrong. So what I did is, since I was first to act, and when I get into situations like this, I'm kind of unsure when I'm going 5 ways or 6 ways to the flop with other people. I went ahead and checked. I checked, and it went all the way around to last to act, which was the button.
So
he had about 65.
Let me just pause you. But do you? So I get that a lot of people get weary in these situations, right? But do you understand sort of my advice now moving forward to these types of scenarios?
Absolutely, 100%. That makes sense.
Yeah, that I wouldn't be scared on this board just because it's multi-way. If the board's 7, 8, 9, 2 flush, sure. Or 6, 7, 8, 2 flush, yeah, I could definitely see checking, right? But a disconnected non-straight board that's raggy, there's just, you got to just look at the 2 pair combos that are possible. That's all I'm going to say. Checking is not terrible. Your hand does need protection though a little bit too. So checking with like aces would be better than like checking with jacks. But okay, so it gets checked around to the button.
Sure. He jams for he had roughly. He jams for 65. And then I'm next to act immediately. So after he jams for 65, I raise it to 180.
So this is interesting. Actually, I'm not sure if you had put this in your original email because I hadn't, or at least I hadn't interpreted it like this. But what I was going to say is, it's funny, right? The guy calls off like 40% of his stack. I mean, what a great spot. If you look at this pre-flop, right? This guy overlimbed on the button. If what you're saying is correct, if we can visualize this, and we'll probably do this for a YouTube video too. So 5 people limp in, you raise to 35, everyone calls. This guy starts with $100. That's a great spot for him to rejam, right? Because you would, from talking about pre-flop, you would isolate him. He'd get like 5-1 on his money. But instead, he just calls pre-35 to leave himself 65. What I had thought when you had emailed him this hand was that somebody bet and you just check raised the flop. I didn't know that this guy was all in. Here, yeah, it's very sort of unorthodox the way that this hand goes down, but I don't have a problem with what you did here. nine of spades, six of hearts, he's betting 65 into 210. So, if you call here, the pot will be like 340, 65 for everybody else to call. They'll be getting 5 or 6 to 1. I don't really have a problem here check raising. The only thing that I will say, and I've talked about this in old stuff, is that occasionally when you check raise a board like this as the pre-flop raiser with an overpair, and usually you would only do it in this case, right, where like somebody's short, if there's an aware player behind you, they can really put a lot of pressure on you, because unless you want to just play for stacks here, someone can kind of eat you alive behind you with a flat call or a re-raise. I've done that a couple times, Commerce 510, where a guy has checked, like somebody has bet in the field, I've called as a field caller, and then the pre-flop raiser check raises over. Obviously, they have an overpair, and then I'm just like, all right, you want to play for stacks for like 3,000, and then I back raise the guy. But that's neither here nor there. I would just want you to say that when you check raise overpairs on boards like this, you can get eaten alive by good players behind you. We don't really do it that often, but in this case, I think it's fine. So you make it 185, okay?
Yeah, and just as a side note, I don't really know why I did it. I don't have a valid explanation other than at the time it felt like the right thing to do. And normally I can analyze hands pretty good, but for some reason, thinking back on it in retrospect, I don't understand why I did it. But nonetheless,
I don't think it's that bad of a play, because like I said, when you look at the sizing in comparison to the pot, the guy's all in, you probably want to have some protection. Like, what if he had been all in for 30? You would have made the same play even more, right?
Right.
I mean, so, maybe once it starts to get up to he's all in for 100, maybe you call, but I wouldn't beat yourself up over this. I think it's probably pretty close, to be honest with you, and I might lean towards check raising. I would probably come out and bet, but anyways, you make it 185, okay?
And then I think one of the bigger fish at the table, guy's really loose. He's a really super nice guy. He's just loose with his money. He had about 700 effective before the hand started.
Okay.
He calls immediately. He doesn't even think about it.
So he's in like middle position-ish, or to your...
Yeah. He has been about middle position.
So a couple people fold to your check raise, MP1 flat. Is that what it is? MP1 flat.
Yes.
And he starts with 700.
Yep.
Okay. And then the rest of the people fold?
Yes.
Okay.
So now I'm heads up, and then one player is all in.
Right. So 185, so he's got 330, 395. So it's probably like, let's see here. So I would say that the pot is 130, 405 in the main. 405 in the main, and then another 240 on the side, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So 405 in the main, 240 on the side. Yep. All right, let's go to the turn.
All right. The turn is the king of hearts, so it brings 2 flush draws. It brings spades and flushes.
Right. Okay.
And I'm first to act. Mm-hmm. I lead out with 250, and again, in retrospect, I think that I should have bet a little bit more, but I lead out for 250, and again, he calls immediately.
Yeah, this one gets really, really complicated here. This is almost like it's like, what do you do? Because it's so far, when people, they fall back to try to look for computer aid and modeling and stuff like that. What's the optimal spot here? Solver stuff. And this is just like, here's my take on what this would be is that it's, you get into situations where the bluffing frequency goes down when the pot's protected. So when you check raise and then bet twice, you very rarely have a bluff. Okay, that might not matter because people might call anyways, but an aware player would know that you just don't really have a whole lot of bluffs. When this guy cold calls your check raise, I'm assuming that you think that he has some spade draws. Do you think he would call with a 9? I'm talking about on the flop. A 9 only?
I initially thought that he had a flush draw when he immediately called on the flop, but then when he called on the turn, I've always been leery of players calling immediately a big bet on the turn that doesn't really help the board too much. It makes me think that maybe they have a backdoor draw or something like that. So that's kind of what I figured on the flop and the turn. That was my thought process.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he's I think his hand is really, really skewed towards draws, or just he's slow playing something. Whether it's 7-8 or front or spades, yeah, occasionally he's going to run into king X of spades. But it looks to me like a bet here is warranted. Again, I don't really have an issue with it, to be perfectly honest with you here. So you bet 250 and he calls again, right?
Yeah. Hey, so is there ever a case for jamming the turn?
Well, I mean, you've got what, like 8. So what did he have left on the turn? He started with 700, so he only has like 500 left on the turn. Is that what it is, basically? He only has a pot-sized bet left on the turn?
Right.
And there's 405 in the main and 240 on the side. It's really awkward. It's really, really awkward. So you only bet half his stack then, basically, right? When you bet 250?
Right. Yes.
I guess you could jam the turn. I'm kind of thinking about this from a more sort of, if you guys had regular stacks, like more stack depth, I like your bet. You never really want to get into a situation where you're only getting called by a better hand, although your hand does need some protection. I'm not sure if checking here is better than jamming. It's really, really awkward, to be honest with you. Would jamming be okay? I think jamming would be okay too. I do. But this might be actually a higher EV play. If you're going to bet 250 and then if the spade comes in, check fold, the pot's protected, right? Remember, very rarely he's going to be bluffing against you here, although the main pot is getting big, so it's definitely an awkward spot. So you bet 250, MP1 calls. So the side pot was 240. But yeah, so the pot now is 540 and 405 in the main, 540 on the side. And he only has like 250 left, right?
Correct.
All right, so let's go to the river.
So I was unsure. So the river is the queen of diamonds, which is another overcard. So I was just unsure what to do. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to push all in and him snap. So my thought process, and this is my honest thought process, I wanted to check and see what he would do and how he did it. So I went ahead and checked, and he immediately pushed all in for 250.
What was the river?
There wasn't even a thought.
What was the river again?
It was a queen. It was a queen of diamonds.
Queen of diamonds. Check,
Yes.
And he jams for 250. Is that right?
Yep.
Jams for 250. So the pot is basically so it's 250. It's basically 1200, 250 for you to call. Here's the thing about this is that this hand doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me in the sense that unless he specifically has king, queen of spades here, 99% of these players, like if he had king X of spades, he's just going to check this back, right? So when he bets the river here, he really is saying, I would be shocked if he ever has something for value that's worse than one pair. So if he doesn't have value that's worse than two pair. So if he doesn't have value that's worse than two pair here, then, he's somewhat polarized, right? He's got a bluff or he's got value that beats you because I don't think he's doing it with king X of spades. But the issue that I have here is that he's got to beat the guy on the side. He's got to beat the guy in the main too. So although the side pot is built up though, if the side pot was 0 and the main was 405, or like say the side pot was 100 and the main was 405 and you checked and he made this bet, I'd be like, God, in a normal case I might call, but it doesn't make any sense for this guy to bluff the side pot here when he has to beat this other guy who obviously probably has a hand. But now the main pot is actually kind of big in this particular scenario. It's a very polarizing bet. I got to be honest with you, probably for these pot odds, I don't know if I can fold here. I mean, the pot's going to be, like I said, 1200, 250 for you to call. Are you good here 1 out of, say, 5 or 6 times when this guy is polarized? Of course, you got to beat the guy on the side too, but I don't like it. It's a shitty spot to be in, but I think I might call here for this price.
So I went ahead and thought about it for about a minute and a half. He's only jamming for value a set, which he would have already jammed on the turn. Maybe he had Jack 10 for a straight, like Jack 10 of spades for a straight for a rivered straight.
Yeah.
He would have done that. Maybe 2 pair. Those are really the only 3 hands that he would have done that with. Anyway, I thought about it for about a minute and a half, and I called, and he ended up having 5-4 of hearts. So he picked up a flush draw. He was open-ended on the flop, picked up flush draw on the turn.
So you won.
So there was just too much money, Bart. There was too much money for me to fold, in my opinion.
Right. And people in this chat are saying that possibly some of the stuff that I was saying in the that there was 990 on the side. We'll clean that up for the YouTube video for the figures, but obviously sometimes we're doing this on the fly. But it looked like I'm sorry, it was 940 on the side, 440, 940 on the side, 405 in the main. So yeah, you're getting a really good price, right? And you said the other guy, you beat the other guy too as well?
Yeah, he had 10-9.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think that I think you, whether it was intentional or not, you played it fine. I would just say from the start, I would probably bet the flop, to be honest with you. And the turn is a dicey proposal. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of jamming turn, but I think that you ended up, maximizing. Obviously, with that side pot being 940, he felt like there was enough money in there for him to bluff, but nicely played.
So let me ask you this. If he had 500 on the river and he jams, is that still pretty much an easy call or not really?
If he had 500 on the river and he jammed here with the same pot being with 940 on the side and 250 on the main, basically.
Yeah, just saying that he has more chips to go all in on the river. Because the only reason pretty much that I called is because there was just too much money in the pot for me to fold. Now, what do I do if he has 500 and he jams with 500 on the river?
I mean, I'd still have a hard time folding, to be honest with you, because he's still trying to pick up basically what is the side pot. It just doesn't make any sense. Whenever someone's polarized in a spot like this, when I think that by the turn they would have raised off with 2 pair plus and sets, then what is he left with here? Besides Jack 10 of spades and King Queen of spades, right? I mean, that's basically it.
Right.
So when he's repping such a thin value range there in that spot, and can be a lot of missed draws, I think I'm still going to call. But anyways, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. If you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this call-in hand, hit the like button down below. To check out crushlivepoker.com, click on the link in the description. Use the code YTA300 to get the first 30 days for free.